Fox News Alert. Let's start with the wildfires in California, where they are claiming lives and changing landscape. Updates this hour. At least 17 people have died. Many more are missing. Fires are burning in neighborhoods that were once considered safe areas. They hadn't seen this before. I'm Harris Faulkner. Let's go outnumbered overtime. Before and after pics. Look at this. They show the sheer magnitude of the destruction to the lives and livelihoods I mentioned. This happened in a matter of minutes. Across the state, 20,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. More than 1,000 acres destroyed, and more than 2,000 homes and businesses burned to the ground. President Trump had this message yesterday as the administration approved a federal disaster declaration for California.
I spoke with Governor Brown last night to let him know that the federal government will stand with the people of California, and we will be there for you in this time of terrible tragedy and need. And I just want to pay my warmest respects. They're going through a lot.
Claudia Cowan picks up our breaking news coverage from Santa Rosa, California. Claudia?
Well, Harris, we are in the Coffee Park neighborhood of Santa Rosa, where literally hundreds and hundreds of homes were destroyed. In fact, take a look. 3 days later, this home is still smoldering. The owners tell me what you're looking at there used to be their washing machine. But as we have seen in so many fires, the home right next door, as you can see, is untouched. We see this time and time again. Now, the owner tells me of this house, this is where the firefighters made a stand in the middle of the night, Sunday night, and sure enough, every other home on this cul-de-sac is okay. But this homeowner faces a tough road ahead, too. He is heartbroken about his neighbors, and everyone here knows it will take many years for this community to rebuild. And many, of course, are still in shock from the trauma of the evacuation that looked like this. Flames everywhere, embers flying and sparking new fires. This dash cam video shot by a Sonoma County Sheriff's deputy. The winds picked up again overnight, sending embers flying and sparking new fires that prompted a new round of evacuations in Napa, Sonoma, and Solano counties. Overnight, the death toll rose to 17. Among the first known victims, an elderly couple in Napa, Charles and Sarah Rippey.
They had their 75th wedding anniversary last May, and they met when they were in grade school, 4th grade, 6th grade, and they've been together ever since. And those of us in the family always would, wonder what would happen if one of them died and the other one was still left, and so they went together.
So many heartbreaking stories. As many as 500 people are still listed as missing, and with cell phone and internet service down, communication has been difficult, to say the least. All of this as the fire in Napa has doubled in size, and more strong winds are expected tonight, along with another red flag warning, meaning fire danger will be returning here in this area. It is going to be another very rough day here on the firefight in Northern California, Harris.
Yeah, it is just stunning to see what happens when fire moves through and all the fuel is gone and it just sits still and smolders. Sometimes we think they can't put themselves out, but when they run out of it, that fuel, they move on, those flames. Claudia, thank you very much. Fox News Alert now on this. President Trump is set to hit the road and pitch his tax plan in Pennsylvania, where he's set to tell an audience of mostly truckers how his plan will be a boon for manufacturing and for their bottom line in particular. Ahead of this road trip, the president is taking a shot at Democrats, many of whom have been blasting his tax proposals. He tweeted this: the Democrats want massive tax increases and soft crime-producing borders. The Republicans want the biggest tax cut in history and the wall, exclamation point. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us now from the North Lawn of the White House. John?
Harris, good afternoon to you. The president continuing his sales pitch for tax reform. It's moving along right now in Congress, but the president is trying to build enough pressure to make it very difficult for members of Congress to say no to him. He's going to be in Pennsylvania later on this afternoon. Pennsylvania is where Democratic Senator Bob Casey is up for re-election next year. The ratings show it anywhere from likely Dem to lean Dem. It seems pretty safe right now, but the president wants to make sure that he enacts as much leverage against Casey as he possibly possibly can. He's going to be in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is solidly Republican territory. A big group of truckers and trucking companies will be joining the president for his speech because the president will be talking about how tax reform can benefit them. The president will in the speech say, quote, "Nothing gets done in America without the hardworking men and women of the trucking industry. When your trucks are moving, America is growing. That is why my administration has taken historic steps to remove the barriers that slow you down. America first means putting American truckers first." Kellyanne Conway, the president's chief counselor, this morning talked about on America's Newsroom how the tax plan would benefit the trucking industry. Listen here.
So the trucking industry, many of them are legacy businesses. They're harmed by the death tax. They are harmed by the top rates, which, of course, for the first time in 80 years, Bill, the president's tax plan would have the pass-through rate, which a lot of trucking companies and owners pay, at 25%. This will spur economic growth.
And the stock market today near the 23,000 mark, just on the promise of tax reform. The president tweeting about that this morning, saying, quote, "Stock market has increased by $5.2 trillion since the election on November the 8th, a 25% increase, lowest unemployment in 16 years. And if Congress gives us the massive tax cuts and reform I'm asking for, those numbers will grow by leaps and bounds. Hashtag make America great again." The president also, for the first time today, giving an estimate on what repatriating corporate funds currently held overseas will mean for taxpayers. In his speech tonight, the president will say, quote, "We will impose a one-time low tax on money currently parked overseas so it can be brought home to America where it belongs. My Council of Economic Advisors estimates that this change alone would likely give the typical American household a $4,000 pay raise." In addition to talking about tax reform, the president will, in about 45 minutes' time, greet the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. NAFTA will, of course, be on the agenda for that meeting, as will a duty against new Canadian Bombardier aircraft. This is to replace the 737 fleet in the United States. Delta has ordered 125 of those jets, but the Commerce Department wants to lay on those aircraft, Harris, a 220% duty. The Canadians are up in arms over this, so you can bet that that will be on the agenda this afternoon.
That will be very interesting. That bilateral news conference, we'll be watching to see how many questions rack up about that point. John Roberts.
Actually, there is no bilateral news conference.
They aren't going to do it. I had heard it back and forth at one point, so they are not actually going to do it.
No, but what will happen is later this afternoon, 3 o'clock, 3:40, at the Canadian Embassy, the Canadian Prime Minister will be talking to the press.
All right. Thank you for clearing that up. Again, there was some back and forth. Now we know the facts for John Roberts, and we love to get them that way from you. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Meanwhile, the top Republican in the Senate is accusing his Democratic colleagues of reversing course and being obstructionists on tax reform. In an op-ed, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said Democrats have renounced some of their own principles. He wrote, quote, "Here in the Senate, the need for tax reform is loudly supported by Democrats, or at least it was until the last election. Now Democrats are under pressure from the left to oppose just about everything President Donald Trump touches, even ideas they themselves used to promote," end quote. Let's bring in Republican Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, a key member and founder of the Conservative Freedom Caucus. Sir, thank you for being here.
You bet. Good to be with you.
I want to circle back a little bit later in our conversation and talk about the politics with the Democrats and where they are. Because some might argue in the House, no matter what you do, then you got to go to the Senate, and it's, well, who knows? So we'll get to that. But I want to talk to you about the Freedom Caucus and where you stand on this tax proposal and what you like and what you think needs fixing.
No, we support the outline and the framework that's been put forward. I mean, there's kind of three fundamental principles. Will it actually cut taxes? Will it simplify the code? And will it be conducive to producing economic growth? And we think with the numbers that have been given, it will do those three things. So it's going to let it's going to bring down the corporate rate and the small business rate to 20 and 25 respectively. We think that is an environment that is conducive to job creation and economic growth. We think it's a good thing, so we're supportive.
Well, Wall Street may be agreeing with you as we add closer to 23,000 on the Dow in our lifetimes. That's huge if that happens at close today. Moving on, though, you talk about that first area where you watch for, does it actually cut taxes? Can you answer a question for me? So, the way that I'm reading this, you're trying to cut taxes for a typical American family, a typical American household. Who are those people, and what does this plan do for them?
We don't know the income levels yet. This is something we've been pushing our leadership to give us. We do know we've gone from 7 brackets to 3 on the personal side, but we want regular families to keep more of their money. This is why the left disagrees with this bill. The left believes in big government. If you believe in big government, you're not for letting regular people keep their money, having the freedom to spend it where they want, their goals, their dreams, their aspirations. So that's the fundamental divide between the parties. But we need to know those income levels where the 12, 25, and 35% rates kick in.
Yeah, it's important, too, Congressman, because if you're going to try to take this on the road and talk to truckers, now the president has got to be rather specific, doesn't he, in terms of how he can help them? We have to get some idea of those levels. What do you think he'll say about that?
Well, we need those levels as soon as possible. I like the rates. I like the numbers are coming down. The brackets are being shrunk to 3, and they're lower rates. I like all that. But we need the income levels. And frankly, what we need, a colleague of ours today talked about this, Thomas Massey from Kentucky. He said, we need the app. As soon as we have the bill, we need the app that says, plug in your numbers, families across this country, and do the work. And when you find out you're getting a tax cut, I think that could maybe have some influence on some Democrat members of Congress when their constituents who may be Democrats say, hey, look, I'm going to get a tax break under the Republicans' plan. I'm going to get to keep more of my money. They may have an incentive to call up their Democrat member and say, you need to switch your position on this and start doing what's going to let me keep more of my resources.
Look, your friend Thomas Matthew has a point there, because the Vice President Pence said that we want a situation where you can do your taxes on one. There's an app for that. That actually does happen. And that's been a big question. How would you make that happen? So I don't know if he's joking about an app for that, but it certainly would push it forward, right? So, okay, and that brings us into that second category you talked about, simplifying the code. We need that desperately. What are some of the areas outside of just filling out your taxes, but some areas that you want to shore up?
Well, we want to get rid of the estate tax. We want to get rid of the alternative minimum tax. We want to get rid of a lot of things that we just think make the tax code cumbersome and frankly make it difficult to grow our economy at the rate that we need to grow it. Never forget, we got a $20 trillion debt. To be able to deal with that, you've got to get to 3.5–4% growth rate to have a chance to address the debt of that magnitude. So let's create a tax code that, again, lets people keep more of their money, that's simpler, flatter, fairer, and one that's conducive to economic growth. We think we're on the road to doing that. We need the final bill so that we can actually get it passed in the House, and then, who knows what happens in the Senate.
Yeah, all right, so let's get back to that now. Senator Mitch McConnell calling out Democrats, saying, you just want to stop this president on everything. You used to like tax reform. You used to like tax cuts. Now you don't.
Oh, truth, yeah.
I want to talk to you about the politics of that, because it will be important for them to pull over some Democrats potentially. What does the president need to say in Pennsylvania today to help out Mitch McConnell? I think you guys got it in the House from what you're telling me.
I think so. I think it will pass the House. I think it'll be a good piece of legislation. I think what the president needs to do is what he's been doing. Just tell regular folks you're going to get to keep more of your money, and we're going to have an economy that's going to continue to grow. It's already been growing under the Trump administration. So I think he just needs to reinforce that, and then just say, look, call up Bob Casey and tell him to do the right thing. Tell him to vote for a tax package that's going to help you and your family. I think that's what it comes down to sometimes in just American politics, and particularly in the United States Senate.
Oh, Congressman Jordan, you're so astute with that, too, because you probably caught that Bob Casey's not going to be there today.
Yeah,
so he'll have to call him up. Before I let you go, one last question, and not to throw you too much for a loop here, but it was said that if you could do tax reform first, you might come back to health care. Any truth to that?
We got to do what we told the American people we were going to do. That includes, obviously, tax reform, but we also won elections in 10, 14, and 16 on Obamacare repeal.
Right.
At some point, we're going to have to get that done as well. In addition to building the wall and all the, I say this all the time, but I say it because it's true. Our job's pretty basic. What'd you tell the voters you're going to do? Let's make sure we get that done. Do what you said you would do. Keep your promise. That's what we got to focus on, and that certainly includes repealing Obamacare.
Well, having been in politics, the American people won't forget that. And they're looking forward to it when you deliver it, sir. Representative Jim Jordan, thank you very much for your time.
You bet. Thank you.
Well, we'll have more on the growing fallout for Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein, a big-time Democratic donor. He has been reportedly headed to rehab in Europe in the wake of those shocking allegations against him. Now, with the scandal growing, Hillary Clinton, former President Barack Obama, finally condemning Weinstein after several days, which has raised some eyebrows, staying quiet for that period of time. We'll get reaction from our media analyst Howard Kurtz is in the House from D.C. He's going to sit with me as White House counselor Kelly Conway weighs in on Clinton's response. Stay tuned.
I felt like a woman who ran to be commander-in-chief and president of the United States, the first one ever, who talks about women's empowerment, took an awfully long time to give support to those women who were coming forward.
Wow, more and more allegations of rape and sexual harassment against disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein. Now he's reportedly checking himself into rehab in Europe. We don't know exactly where. All this as his wife of a decade says she's out. She's leaving the marriage. Chief correspondent Jonathan Hunt is live for us in Los Angeles with the latest on this. Jonathan?
Hey, Harris, conflicting reports of whether Weinstein might be in rehab here in the U.S. or have headed to Europe right now. But while we're not sure where he is, we are sure his former friends continue to desert him amid a cascading collection of abuse allegations. A who's who of Hollywood that once revered or feared him is now condemning him, as superstars Gwyneth Paltrow and Angelina Jolie say they were both victims of Weinstein's predatory ways. Paltrow saying when she was just 22 years old and Harvey Weinstein was offering her a major role, he put his hands on her and suggested they head to his bedroom. Weinstein's wife of 10 years has announced she plans to separate from him. Georgina Chapman saying, quote, "My heart breaks for all the women who have suffered tremendous pain because of these unforgivable actions. I have chosen to leave my husband. Caring for my young children is my first priority, and I ask the media for privacy at this time." And now the reporter who investigated allegations of rape by Harvey Weinstein and published them in The New Yorker is questioning why the NBC network, for whom he also works, apparently spiked a potential TV expose of Weinstein. Listen here.
NBC says that, the story wasn't publishable, that it wasn't ready to go by the time that you brought it to them. But obviously it's ready to go by the time you got it into The New Yorker.
I walked into the door at The New Yorker with an explosively reportable piece that should have been public earlier, and immediately, obviously, The New Yorker recognized that, and it is not accurate to say that it was not reportable. In fact, there were multiple determinations that it was reportable at NBC.
Now, NBC has not responded to our request for an official comment, but the network's view appears to be represented by anchor Rachel Maddow's implication that the story was not ready for TV primetime. As for Weinstein, he's not made any public statements since last week. We've reached out repeatedly to the PR firm that is supposed to be representing him, Harris. They seem very reluctant to do any PR on Weinstein's behalf right now. Not a word from them whatsoever, Harris.
All right, Jonathan, we have plenty of words to speak about this coming up with our guests. Thank you very much for racking up the facts on that. After nearly a week of intense pressure, Hillary Clinton and former President Barack Obama finally condemned major Democratic donor Harvey Weinstein, an important part of his resume in all of this. Amid rape and sexual harassment allegations against the Hollywood mogul, they have now come out against him. White House counselor Kellyanne Conway slammed Hillary Clinton's response on Twitter with this. It took Hillary about 5 minutes to blame the NRA for Madman's rampage, but 5 days to sort of kind of blame Harvey Weinstein for his sexual assault. Howard Kurtz is a Fox News media analyst and the host of Media Buzz, and I say that with extra oomph because A, he's my friend, and B, this is your wheelhouse. So NBC, how did they defend not accepting that report from Ronan Farrow, which he said he had 8 or 9 people ready to go on camera?
NBC isn't saying very much. An unnamed NBC source is putting out this line that, oh, the story didn't meet our standards, it wasn't ready. It was just a few weeks, Harris, between the time that NBC turned down what turned out to be the most explosive entertainment scandal in some time, and it was published in the pages of The New Yorker. And by the way, clearly Ronan Farrow had an audio tape of an incident where the New York police wired an Italian model who says she was groped by Harvey Weinstein. It's a chilling audio tape. He acknowledges the groping that this woman claims. That in and of itself would have been a story, but not for NBC.
Wow. I'm looking down at my notes, and I want to ask about how this goes forth, though, with NBC and Ronan Farrow, because he was doing some freelance work for them. He did have a show with MSNBC. There's some relationship there. So, what this came across as is they were kind of impugning his journalism in a sense. Oh, it's not ready for prime time, but they got to be careful with that, right?
Absolutely, and I give Ronan Farrow credit for answering the question bluntly that it should have been published sooner. He's a special correspondent for NBC News. And the fact is that we haven't heard an adequate explanation. We have to keep in mind that there was business relationships between Harvey Weinstein's company and NBC's Universal pictures, NBC's Bravo channel, also Harvey, a big liberal, big Democratic donor. Maybe he was a little bit less of an attractive target, therefore, for the people at NBC, but it really is inexplicable.
You know, I want to talk about the coziness, and not to bend too hard in the direction of Hillary Clinton, but we do have a recent example of the coziness between some of these networks, politicians, and their donors. Remember Hillary Clinton getting a debate question or two from a former employee at CNN who also was running the DNC at the time. I mean, that coziness kind of gets a little smoky, doesn't it? And then you mix in a donor who gives the kind of money that Harvey Weinstein has given to politicians.
Yeah, it just makes you wonder whether there is a double standard, at least in some instances, at some networks and other news organizations when it comes to treating in the campaign setting Democratic candidates. And look, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, who both received fundraising help from Harvey Weinstein, if they are shocked and appalled and disgusted, to use their words, by what happened, why did it take nearly 6 days to be shocked and appalled and disgusted? I mean, I think this is a classic case of selective outrage. They said nothing even after the original New York Times story laying out these sexual harassment allegations against Weinstein, which he denies, even after Harvey Weinstein apologized, even after the company he founded fired him, even after some other Democrats were giving back donations. The former president and the last presidential candidate remained silent until yesterday.
Well, the DCCC, did I get 2 C's there? That Democratic committee is looking at giving funding back and giving it to charities. That's what they have decided to do to these politicians real quickly. A former presidential candidate and a former president. Do they need to take a closer look at doing that immediately as well?
I think they need to take a closer look. I think they need to say more, especially Hillary Clinton, such a champion of women's issues and women's empowerment, who had plenty to say about Donald Trump's problems. I don't think a brief statement is going to cut it at this point.
Howard Kurtz talking about the media, as he always does. Media Buzz on Sundays. We never miss it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Harris.
Fox News Alert now, a controversial move by an American institution. The Boy Scouts has just announced they will now accept girls into every level of that organization. Is that a good idea? Or is it political correctness gone too far? We're going to talk about it. Plus, President Trump reportedly expected not to recertify the Iran nuclear deal. That will come tomorrow. Critics are saying, well, if the deal is bad, there are reasons to stick with it anyway. I'll talk with Congressman Peter King of New York next about the best course of action and what is at stake. Stay close.
American officials should make clear they are preparing contingency plans to defend against further Iranian tests of nuclear-capable missiles.
President Trump reportedly is expected not to recertify the Iran nuclear deal tomorrow, and that would kick the matter to Congress, which would then have 60 days to determine a path forward. Ahead of that announcement, the House Foreign Affairs Committee held a hearing today on the threats we're still facing from Iran. Here's a touch of that.
We don't know to what extent Iran is engaged in the complex, but more easily hidden work of designing a nuclear warhead. And that's why clear majorities on this committee and in the House opposed the nuclear deal. Ultimately, however, the Obama administration rammed it through anyway. As flawed as the deal is, I believe we must now enforce the hell out of it.
Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice echoing that sentiment, saying the United States should stay in the deal while it's fixed.
You decertify the deal. I hope that they'll find some way to keep it in place while they try to improve it. And I think that's the strategy that they are trying to carry out here. We've got to focus more on what the Iranians are doing in the Middle East, the trouble that they're making in Yemen or in Syria, but not just to pull out of the deal, which I think would have deleterious effects on our alliances.
Let's bring in Congressman Peter King of New York, a member of the House Homeland Security Committee and the Intelligence Committee. Good to have you, sir. Thank you for being with us. Those are actually two different things. I mean, former Secretary of State Rice is saying, stay in it while you fix it, but Congressman Royce is saying, you know what, enforce the hell out of it. Maybe not mutually exclusive, but they are different.
They are different, and I have a great respect for Ed Royce, but on this one, I'm much closer to Condi Rice. I can understand why the president is going to decertify it, because this is a vitally important agreement, and right now we have no assurances that the Iranians are complying. They basically, the military has said that the IAEA cannot inspect their sites. The IAEA has said that they cannot fully find out what Iran is doing and not doing. We also know the extent to which they are subsidizing and supporting terrorist groups throughout the Middle East and indeed throughout the world. So I think this could be an opportunity. I understand why the president's doing it. I realize it's a close call, but I believe this get back into Congress and we can begin new negotiations, talking about different sanctions and to try to get to clean this up, because there's no doubt in my mind from what you hear is that while Iran may be in some technical compliance, I'm not sure they are assembling parts which could lead to nuclear weapons. The IAE is being stiff-armed in some ways. So I think, again, this is an opportunity to get there, have that 60 days in the House and the Senate, and really go forward from there.
So last hour on Outnumbered, one of our guest co-hosts, Jillian Turner, said, what this does, too, is allow the president not to have to keep recertifying this every 90 days. You don't want to get into a position where you're having to do that, but you're going to have to watch Iran closely anyway, because they're firing missiles like a boss.
They really are. And again, I think this also sends a signal, to the rest of the world. I know that, the general accepted belief is that the other nations, signed on to this agreement, that they already have business there, and I realize that, and that they'd be reluctant to go along with us as far as new sanctions. Well, we are the leader of the free world. And that's why this has to be coordinated. You have to be coordinated between the White House and the Congress, that any action we do take, we're going to be speaking with one voice. And that, I think, can put pressure and influence on our allies, others who are signatories to the agreement, which is why it's important that, again, we speak with one voice. We can't have Congress going in one direction, the president going in another. It has to be a unified effort by the executive and by the House and Senate.
So I want to talk to you about leverage then. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I mentioned this last hour, that there are countries whose companies are already doing business with Iran. And unless you're going to write a big old fat check to those countries, they're probably not going to come on board. So who do we really need to pull across that finish line in terms of that, and what should that look like?
Well, I don't want to start an international moment here. But I would say any of those main countries who are signatories to it or are allies of us, we have economic pressure too. And as far as we can put our own, if not sanctions, certainly we can say that companies doing business in Iran cannot be doing business with American companies, cannot be getting credit from American banks. So anyway, this is, again, all part of the backroom type of leverage negotiations that we should be doing. And again, we are in a position of strength. Europe still needs us to some extent. We may need them, but they need us more. And it's important, I think, that we have to get unified. We have to all be saying the same thing. We can't have the president saying one thing and having the House and Senate saying something else, or then disagreeing about the tactics we agree on. Whatever we agree on, if we do, it has to then stay consistent and be with one voice.
Are you confident? Because, the American people may be wondering, because you couldn't get certain things done in Congress. Are you confident that you will be in unison with this?
We have 60 days to get it done. We have 60 days.
That's a very political answer, sir.
No, listen, again, I don't know. Again, I don't know exactly what the president's going to be looking for. I mean, this is his call in the first place. And then we have to find out what the president is willing to accept, what we feel we can get through. So I'm not being political. I'm being realistic there, because there's so many different competing elements. I want to work with the president. I want to support the president on this. I think Iran definitely got the best of us on the agreement. And to the extent that we can firm it up for us, to the extent we can put more, if not sanctions, at least more observation towers into Iran to find out what's happening here, and to stand with the IAEA and others to see exactly what Iran is doing, and also, to prevent them from getting supplies which may be technically okay under the agreement, but we feel are leading toward a nuclear weapon. We have to, again, work together on that.
Well, that's a great point. Before I let you go, and you touched on it a bit here, but I think it's so valuable to know where we've been, to visit that history. I keep hearing, and even Congressman Royce said this today, given the fact that he's willing to enforce, quote, the hell out of it, we never should have been in this deal. I've heard you say it before. Why?
Because this gave everything to Iran. They got all this incredible amount of cash up front. That is, their economy was going down each day, and that boosted their economy, gave them strength. It opened up new markets for them. It allowed other countries to invest in Iran. And let me also say, Ed Royce is a phenomenal chairman of Foreign Affairs. I don't think we've ever had a better one. So I certainly respect him completely. And I wish Ed Royce had been negotiating this last agreement instead of John Kerry.
All right. Representative Peter King of New York, I appreciate you being on board with your expertise on this, sir. Come back anytime. Thank you.
Okay, and congratulations on the new show.
Oh, thank you, sir. I'm very blessed.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, they have not said they're running for president. in 2020, but Hillary Clinton has some advice anyway. For two women, stars of the Democratic Party, just in case they're thinking about jumping in, she says Senators Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris should be prepared for, quote, a double standard as female candidates. Is she suggesting that she lost because she was a woman? Well, I tell you, it got heated on the Outnumbered couch with this. We're going to revisit with our power panel and bring back the topic. Hillary Clinton is offering some advice to Democratic Senators Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren. She says if they make a run for the presidency in 2020, they better be mindful of the double standard for women in politics.
You have to have a high pain threshold because the double standard is alive and well. It's not going to disappear in 2 years or 4 years. This is a continuing problem, and for any woman in politics, in the public eye, you know, you have to call it out, but you have to do it in a way that doesn't create a backlash against you for calling it out. It's a constant balancing act.
Outnumbered was hot on this one. Back from the couch, former White House National Security Council staffer Jillian Turner, who had a definite opinion about this, Christopher Bedford, editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller and author of The Art of the Donald. I understand the president even tweeted that people should run out and get that book.
And they should. They absolutely should if they want to learn his lessons.
There you go. Well, it's great to have you both. So, Jillian, I want to tee this up a little bit with why this was such a hot-button topic with you.
I think, to me, I was thinking about this some more in the last half an hour. There's really two issues at stake when we talk about this. I think there's the question of, is there gender discrimination in the workplace in the United States of America? Do women face extra challenges and hurdles that their male counterparts don't? I'm firmly in the yes camp on this. No one's going to convince me otherwise. But then there's a separate question of, is this what cost Hillary Clinton the election? You know, I don't have the answer. Probably not. And I think that when we conflate the two things, we lose a little bit of the texture, the important texture here, which I think maybe we shouldn't be having the gender discrimination conversation around politics. Maybe that makes it too treacherous.
Well, that's tough if that's part of your identity, though, right? I mean, I'm with her was the hashtag.
Right. I am with her. It was pretty strange. It wasn't even she's with me. It was I'm with her. The problem with Hillary Clinton was that she was Hillary Clinton. There was some professors over at NYU did an actual test on this because they assumed that she wouldn't have gotten away with being Donald Trump because women weren't allowed to act like that. So they switched the roles and acted out a debate. And they wrote this paper. It's not scientific, but it's NYU, a hotbed of liberalism. They wrote this paper, and they came out with the crowd saying that they actually liked female Donald Trump more than male Hillary Clinton. They reversed everything.
Oh, my goodness, Christopher.
That's an interesting take.
All right, let's talk about, though, this one part of it, Jillian. And it is the idea that the only way that women can kind of go forth is if we all buy into the fact that we're all victims somehow.
Right.
And while I do understand that you say that there's discrimination out there based on gender, I get that. But that cannot become the box that women check for why things don't work out. I didn't get such and such because I was a woman. Sooner or later, it's got to be merit-based. Otherwise, we don't go forward.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that 100%. I don't think there is a place in presidential politics for crying victim and getting sympathy on that measure. So I don't agree with Hillary Clinton's approach there. But I will say, my personal approach to all of this is that I'm a little bit in the Sheryl Sandberg camp on this, which is that calling attention to the fact that these challenges exist doesn't victimize women. It empowers women. And so I feel that you can use it as a way to actually make the system better. And
well, that would be interesting if she were actually doing that. Is that what she's doing, Christopher? Because she also had that opportunity with the sexual assault allegations and harassment allegations against the movie mogul Harvey Weinstein, which gave her campaign and many others on the Democratic side of the ticket a whole lot of cash. She had an opportunity to empower and to use the words that Jillian's using.
And the Harvey Weinstein scandal, a really sad scandal of decades of abuse of pretty vulnerable people from a very powerful guy, really illustrated some of the problem here with this identity politics. A lot of these politicians who consider themselves certainly moral leaders, even the Obamas, the Clintons, people who have spoken out increasingly and dramatically on women's rights were silent for days when one of their friends was doing this, when one of their friends was busted, when one of the Hollywood elite was busted doing this. And maybe you have to wonder, this wasn't actually about women's rights as much as it was about politics. And they used it for political gain. It really hurts them. It makes them look bad right now. They don't want to talk about it.
Interesting. So you segue them back to Hillary Clinton trying to give the girlfriends a heads up. Last word.
Chris picked up, mentioned a key, sort of touchstone word, which is identity politics. I just caution folks, conservatives and liberals, who like to throw this around. I think at the end of the day, all politics originally in this country is identity politics. And it's important to keep that in mind when we start throwing that against minority populations today.
All right, Jillian, thank you very much. And Christopher, I'm going to ask you guys to stick around because the breaking news this hour has been a big change in the Boy Scouts of America. They are now going to have in some of their cub dens the choice of girls joining the ranks. Is this PC run amok or something else? Political correctness? We'll talk about it. Stay close. Fox News Alert, the President Trump and the First Lady welcoming the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his wife to the White House. This was moments ago as we were in the commercial break. We are now showing you what happened just a couple seconds ago. This is the ceremonial greeting that they give on the South Portico when a prime minister or a leader of another country comes and meets with the president. Normally at this time there might be or may not be audio. Let's let this breathe and see. Sometimes this president likes to talk. All right, we just hear the flashing and the shutters of the cameras there. But the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau expected to talk about trade with the president, as you might imagine. NAFTA talks beginning today. Let's move on. This breaking news. An American institution has announced a huge change today. The Boy Scouts of America will now welcome girls into the organization. Girls will be allowed throughout the ranks, from the youngest Cub Scouts to the top award of Eagle Scout, to participate. The Scouts say that this expands its programs that already include girls. The group's chief executive says, quote, "The values of Scouting are important for both young men and women. We believe it is critical to evolve how our programs meet the needs of families interested in positive and lifelong experiences for their children," end quote. We're back with our power panel right now, Christopher and Jillian. Okay, so political correctness. You're already seeing a blowback in social media. I mean, it happened almost immediately. Is this an answer back to that, Christopher?
Well, it's definitely boys taking over some girls' space. These are both really old institutions. They're a century old. The Boy Scouts is 2 years older. Also, you've seen membership declining. The problem isn't there aren't more girls in the Boy Scouts. The problem is that Hispanics and Asians aren't really interested in joining the Boy Scouts. They're seeing membership declining. The Girl Scouts are seeing membership declining. I think the Girl Scouts are right to be worried about this. They're saying, hey, wait a second, we have our organization, we have our traditions. The Boy Scouts look at this as families wanting to drop off their sons and daughters at the same time and have it all.
Interesting, because this just came out from the Girl Scouts. Excuse me, Jillian, I'll get this in and then get your response. The Girl Scouts of the USA criticized the initiative, saying it strained the century-old bond between the two organizations. Girl Scouts officials have suggested that the Boy Scouts move was driven partly by financial problems and a need to boost revenue. In August, the reporting goes on here that the president of the Girl Scouts accused the Boy Scouts of seeking to covertly recruit girls into their programs while disparaging the Girl Scouts operations. You've been reading about this. Your thoughts?
So if what Chris tells us is indeed the scenario and the move is a little bit of I don't want to mischaracterize what you said, but this is a little bit of overreach, boys and girls space, the Boy Scouts seeing declining membership in the Girl Scouts and trying to pull some of those folks to their own team. Maybe this is a good thing for the Girl Scouts, meaning maybe it's a good thing for girls. If they can find programs that they're happy with and they feel they can participate in, who cares what the banner is? Who cares about what the name of the organization is? It's about bringing young kids together and giving them important life skills. So maybe it's a win.
Critics will say, though, Christopher, as they often do, can there be a space for the genders to be in a single gender organization? Can there be a space for boys? Can there be?
So its days are certainly numbered. You've seen it at Harvard University, where you can't be in student government if you're part of an all-male club or an all-women's club. And you're going to see it in the Boy Scouts, but they're delaying it. For now, they're saying that even though you can be a Girl Scout of America with their organization, you're going to be in a separate pack. It's going to be a girls-only troop and a boys-only troop where you'll have the same activities, but you won't go camping together because that would be too much to chaperone.
All right, so let's talk about political correctness, because what you're saying, too, and I read through, some of the cub dens now will still be single gender, but there will be the side-by-side of boys and girls. As they get older, though, and toward eagles, from what I'm reading, and you've read the same thing here, there will be some mixing of the genders. That's how I read it. Where are we in this with political correctness?
Well, I think political correctness might run up against reality when it turns out that maybe girls aren't quite as interested in learning how to whittle sticks as the boys are. I mean, the Eagle Scout program has been designed over 100 years to be tailored specifically to young men who are interested in this. The Girl Scouts of America, the other organization, has programs that are largely outdoorsy too. But if this move is an attempt by folks to push that PC idea and make everyone go through the same programs, people don't have the same fun when they're kids. They're interested in different things.
Jillian?
Definitely true. One notable thing that I read in the release from the Boy Scouts is that they're going to include programs for older girls, which is a nice, and you talk about politics and being PC, it's nice to see the Boy Scouts embracing older women in a way that, say, Hollywood does not. So that's good.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's really funny. So your take on this is that there may be some appreciation as women age among the Boy Scouts. I'm going to give you the last word on that. I didn't see that coming from Jillian.
I think that sounds good. If this is a social engineering
who's going to
project,
argue about not appreciating older women, right?
If this is a social engineering project, it could be. I think it's more of a business constraints project. Kids don't want to go outdoors as much. If it is, it's going to run headlong into a log cabin. It's not going to work.
All right. Later today, President Trump departs the White House for Pennsylvania to talk tax reform. We're back in a moment.